Good morning, Nigeria, and a beautiful week to you. Welcome to today's newspaper review. First, we'll start with the Daily Trust. On the Daily Trust newspaper, the lead page says, Federal government exam fee hike raises dropout fears. The full story is on page 4 of the newspaper. The federal government has raises WAEC and NECO fee to 50,000 naira. Then at the top of the same newspaper, parents of abducted Borno pupils mount pressure after Oyo rescue. The full story is on page 7 of the same newspaper. And then on page 6 of the newspaper, 9 family members, 27 others killed in Plateau, Borno, and Niger State. Then on page 41 of the newspaper, he was our hope, father of slain 28-year-old Lieutenant mourns. Recall that during the rescue of the Oyo pupils, the 28-year-old lieutenant military personnel was killed, and then the father said he was the hope of the family. Then at the bottom of the newspaper on page 5, one agency, 2 heads, Wike's ally remains in office despite Tinubu's directives. We move away from that newspaper to the Daily Independent. On the Daily Independent, according to reports on page 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the newspaper, Nigeria's economy recovery leaving millions behind. Then at the top of the same newspaper, condemnation mounts over new 50,000 naira WAEC NECO exam fee. Still in the same newspaper, APC sweeps Edo Council polls, wins all 18 chairmanship seats. The full story is on page 7 of the newspaper. Then on page 4 of the newspaper, e-payment fraud losses drop, but advanced cyber tactics rise. Still in the same newspaper, Khan hails Oyo pupils rescue, urges total freedom for all hostages. The full story is on page 5 of the newspaper. We move away from that newspaper to the Nigerian Tribune. On the Nigerian Tribune on page 2, untold story of Orire rescue operation. Then at the top of the same newspaper, suspected heathers kill 16 people in Benue State. The full story is on page 26 of the newspaper. Then on page 4 of the newspaper, Iran closes Straits of Hormuz as hostilities escalate with US. Iran has closed Straits of Hormuz, and then the disagreement is still ongoing between them and the US. Then on page 5 of the newspaper, experts warn on multiplicity of security agencies at Nigeria's airport. Then at the bottom of the newspaper on page 22, APC kicks as INEC extends deadline for presidential and National Assembly nomination list. So INEC has extended their deadline. So other parties who haven't uploaded their candidate's name in the portal, they still have time to do all of that. We move away from that newspaper to the Vanguard newspaper. On the Vanguard newspaper on Orire abduction, how arrest of kidnappers' family members led to rescue of victims. Our children may not return to schools. Orire parents. So the parents of the kidnapped victims are saying that their children may not return to school. The full story is on page 10 and page 6 of the newspaper. Then on page 12 of the newspaper, banks slash lending cut 5.4 trillion naira across key sectors. Then on page 7 of the same newspaper, oil cartels, tanker operators, enforcement agencies blame for Apapa, Kirikiri grilled lock. The full story is on page 7 of the newspaper. We move away from that newspaper to the Matrix. On the Matrix newspaper on page 2, the lead page is on 2027. INEC extends deadline for parties to submit candidates for elections. Then the follow-up story says APC mocks opposition, says INEC's extension exposes unpreparedness for polls. Then Wike-backed PDP loads presidential National Assembly candidate to INEC portal. At the top of that same newspaper on page 3, Nigeria's crude oil production rises to 74-month high, says NUPRC. Then in the middle of the same newspaper on page 3 as well, outrage greets federal government's plan to hike WAEC NECO fees to 50,000 naira. Then article says millions of poor students could be denied education. Exactly. If this NECO and WAEC fees is being raised to 50,000 naira, millions of the poor masses will be denied education. The new fees represent 80% increase from current 27,500 registration costs. Even when the NECO was 27,500 naira, still a lot of people cannot afford it. Then talk more when they've taken it to 50,000 naira. Still in the same newspaper, at the bottom of the newspaper on entertainment, this is coming from Pella. He says he enrolled in marriage counseling ahead of his white wedding with Jarvis. Then on page 2 of the newspaper, this is coming from the senator. They say that state police is Tinubu's master stroke against insecurity. Then on page 9 of the same newspaper, the presidency says that PFIPC scandal exposes failures in federal government's budget, appointment, and banking system. That's the Presidential Foreign Intervention Promotion Council scandal has exposes failure in federal government's budget, appointment, and banking system. We'll move away from that newspaper to the Daily Monitor. On the Daily Monitor newspaper on Orere release, heal trauma, not just rescue freedom. Catholic bishop urged federal government. The full story is on page 2 of the newspaper. So this is not just about rescuing the children. They also need to be checked. They also need to undergo classes for their trauma to be healed. Then on page 2 of the same newspaper, at the top of the newspaper, alleged fake agency scam. Police to arraign Adeyemi on Tuesday. Then in the middle of the newspaper on page 3, troops killed ISWAP cameraman, identify Palestinian terrorist trainer, Moroccan doctor in Borno State. Then on page 2 of the newspaper, abduction, Khan celebrates release of Oyo pupils and teachers. Then on page 3 of the newspaper, this is coming from Winner Chapel's pastor, that's Pastor Oyedepo, Pastor David Oyedepo. He says, secure your PVC ahead of 2027 elections. This is him giving urging his members to secure their PVC ahead of 2027 election. Then at the bottom of the same newspaper, on 2027, INEC extends deadline for submission of candidate list by 3 days. We move away from that newspaper to The Guardian. On The Guardian newspaper on page 6, Nigeria leaves e-waste recycling to hustlers, misses out on $89 billion income. The full story is on page 6 of the newspaper. Then on the foreign scene on page 3, Trump's new African convoy visits Nigeria, presents new migration deal. Then on page 2 of the newspaper, Dangote cracks down on illegal haulage, offers 500,000 naira reward for whistleblowers. Then on page 3 of the same newspaper as well, Oyi decries doctor-patient ratio gaps, widening infrastructure deficit. The full story is on page 2 of the newspaper. Then at the bottom of the newspaper, this is coming from article. He says, NAS fault proposed 5,000 naira WAEC NECO fees hike. The full story is on page 7 of the newspaper. Terrorists kill 9 Plateau family members, 18 in Benue attack. The full story is on page 30 of the newspaper. Still in the same newspaper on page 7, 2027, Igbo leaders raises concerns over suppression of opposition. We move away from that newspaper to our last newspaper for today, which is the Daily Sun. On the Daily Sun newspaper, the lead page says, Orire school children. Security sources reveal how abductors, wives, kids Arrest pave way for rescue. The full story is on page 6 of the newspaper. Then at the top of the newspaper, article slams federal government over increase in WAEC NECO fees. The full story is on page 25 of the newspaper. Says government making education more expensive for Nigerians. Then on page 24 of the newspaper, DMO, federal government borrows 7.6 trillion naira via T-bills, bonds in 6 months. At the bottom of the same newspaper, ICPC to array ex-minister Nnaji today. PFIPC Director General Adeniyi tomorrow. The full story is on page 28 of the newspaper. Why I want to engage Obi in debate. This is coming from Umahi, the Minister of Works, David Umahi. The full story is on page 28 of the newspaper. He's giving reason why he wants to engage Peter Obi in a debate. Then on page 24 of the newspaper, first floating LNG project. UTM offshores target September final investment decision. Then on page 25 of the newspaper, rescue other Nigerians in captivity in Borno, Katsina, and other states. This is coming from the Christian Association of Nigerians. They are telling the federal government to rescue other Nigerians in captivity in Borno State, Katsina, and the other states. We've come to the end of the newspaper review. Many thanks for watching, and do have a beautiful day as we bring you more breaking news.